everybody. Randy from Bible Over a Beer. That's
Steve.
yeah, you know him, Steve,
right.
my partner in crime. I'm back in Florida, so we're doing this Zoom again. We're going to be covering 2 Samuel. Cheers.
Nastorovia.
Chink. We had a nice head on it when I first poured it, but it's gone.
Some things you just don't say out
I
loud.
haven't had a beer since the last time we were together. It tasted really good. Maybe I should drink more now.
I'm going to rate that down.
All right, so where did we leave off last time? What happened to Saul?
He was dead.
Our
Killed
buddy Saul.
battle.
Killed
And
in battle, lost that battle big time, called up Samuel, which, Samuel was having a nice rest. He wasn't too happy about it. Saul and some of his sons are dead, but we found out he's got more sons.
Yes.
All kinds of sons.
Oh, I mean, that's kind of
chapters 1. We're going to go 1 through 8. And chapter 1 starts with David hears of Saul's death. So he's just getting the news now. So, Saul was involved in that battle with the Philistines, correct?
yes.
Battle, which, a lot of battles with the Philistines. And he lost. And so he threw himself on, I believe it said he threw himself on his sword.
Yeah, he did because his arm bearer didn't want to kill him. Remember,
Right. So I'm thinking that they also call a sword a spear, because this chapter starts with that he had thrown himself on a spear.
6 to 1, half a dozen, another.
Yep. So this man who was witness to the battle came across Saul, who was on his spear and wasn't quite dead yet. So Saul had asked him for mercy, basically, please take my life here, so that they can't come and abuse me and use me and do whatever the heck they want to do with me. So that young man obliged him. He took his crown and he took his armband and he went to David to give him the news. You know what happened from there, Steve-O?
Yeah, well, I'm going to add a little bit too, because when David was he returned from striking down the Amalekites, right? So
Yep.
Here this kid that ended up shows up with with Saul's stuff. David questions him, who are you? And he's like, oh, I'm an Amalekite. He just got done fighting them, and then he's like, who are you to strike down the Lord's anointed? So he was not happy with it, and
Right.
2 strikes, he's already an enemy because they were just fighting him, and now he committed that he killed. He finished off because we thought he was dead, but because he fell on his sword, but apparently he was still alive, and this poor dude, all beat up, came running to his aid, and no luck. See you later.
We didn't know that in the last chapter, because it said that, as far as I was concerned, he had killed himself on his sword, because then his arms bearer also took his life by killing himself on the sword. Turns out he was still alive. This young man was doing a mercy, and David has a way of doing that. He's done this before, where somebody came to give him what they thought was good news, and this kid runs up, hey, here's your crown, and look what I did here for you. And David was not happy. So
yeah, we'll learn that shortly too. A similar situation.
So David comes up with a lament for Saul and, Jonathan, who's also gone. You have something to say before that?
I was going to say, no, you're going to sing it for us? It's another song.
I practiced it for a while, but my dog started howling, so I thought probably not a good idea. But that's just how the chapter ends, with David's lament. It's a passionate expression of grief. And he ordered the people of, is it Judah or Judea? Judah. He taught the lament.
I think Judah, it's Judah, and I think Judea is like the area, I don't know.
Okay. Gotcha.
I thought there was something at the end of the lament in verse 26. I agree for you, Jonathan. This is about Jonathan, how we learned before that they were like brothers. They were kindred spirits.
Yes.
I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were very dear to me. Your love for me was more wonderful than that of woman. Thought that was a weird.
Yeah.
I don't want to go down a weird path, but that just seems there's some fringe stuff you've heard that David and his weird relationship with Jonathan. I think
Right.
it's the wording. I think it was just pure love.
Oh, yeah. Like you have a love for the Lord.
Yeah.
Basically, they were that close. So you're saying you don't feel that way about me, basically. That kind of, no, we'll get there. Don't
Yeah,
worry.
we'll have to work on that one.
We are on to chapter 2. David anointed the king of Judah, not Israel. He's anointed the king of Judah. And that chapter starts out with David, his 2 wives, his men, and their families settled in Hebron as commanded by the Lord. And he was anointed king.
Yes, he consulted the Lord's guidance and he said, yes, go to, you should go to Hebron.
This is where you need to be. And David has a habit of doing that. It's a good habit. Consult the Lord.
That's why he's the
David
favorite.
was told of men that buried Saul, and he sent a message to them. And those men were Benjaminites, correct?
Yes.
It went and took Saul off the wall and buried him.
Oh,
and
no, they weren't Benjamites. They were
Benjaminites. No?
no, well, Jabesh Gilead says praise. So they could be. I'll have to put it up in the video. But yeah, I just thought, he sent praise to the men of Jabesh Gilead. So if that's where, you're probably right. It's probably the Benjamites that live there.
Look back, I was using this thing right here in my old memory, and it could be wrong. I mean, it's happened before. So, but if anybody out there knows, please comment, let us know. But in verse 5 of chapter 2, David thanked them. May the Lord now show you kindness, and I too will show you the same favor. So he was just very grateful that they had done that for Saul and his boys.
Yeah, I mean, Saul was anointed, and David respected that.
Exactly.
Crazy
now,
stuff.
We have war between the houses of David and Saul. So even though Saul is gone, he still has men that are loyal to him and also to his one son, Ishbosheth.
Ishbosheth. Yes.
Saul's commander, Abner. And we remember Abner. He was the one that was sleeping by Saul when David snuck into the camp.
Yes, we do.
He made Ishbosheth, Saul's son, king over Gilead, Asher, Jezreel, Ephraim, Benjamin, and all Israel. So I thought this was interesting that, Abner didn't seek the power for himself.
Well, I don't think he'd have, as we learned, he hasn't got power yet. So in other words, he hasn't, well, it's obviously Saul's son. It's the logic choice. It's the heir. He's the right to the throne in his eyes. So yeah.
That's what I meant. I mean, he was the commander of the army, so I would assume he'd have the army behind him. He could have maybe seized power, and he chose not to. Right? He's doing the right thing.
Well, I'm not.
So this next part is going to be a battle between Abner's men and David's men, but it starts out with Abner taking Ishbosheth with Benjamites to the pool of Gideon. Pool of Gideon.
Yep. Gibeon, Gibeon. Yeah.
Okay. And Joab, is that how you'd say it? Took David's men. How many men? I'm not really sure. But it goes on to say that Abner said, let's have some men fight.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they were opposite with armies. And Abner just said, hey, you know what? Let's get 12 guys, 12 of my guys, 12 of your guys, and let's just have them fight. Maybe before the battle.
Well, I think it's kind of a little bit back how when Goliath came out and taunted, was just one can defeat. Maybe this is kind of a battle tactics. They've kind of, so let's do the 12. It didn't have 12 though. I mean, even though Abner came up with it. So go ahead and tell us how it.
It didn't have a good explanation of it, but that's sort of what I got out of it. And I could be wrong. Please let us know. So he said, yeah, let's have some of the young men get up and fight hand to hand. 12 Benjamites against 12 of David's men. Each man stood opposite each other, and they stabbed the other in the side, and they fell down together. The place is now called Helkath Hazurim, Field of Daggers. So me and you were standing apart from each other. I do that, you do this. We get each other at the same time. We all fall over, 12 dead. And now a battle ensues, is what I'm getting from it.
Oh, yeah.
A battle ensues. David's men defeat the Israelites. And then Abner was pursued. by one of Joab's brothers,
Yeah,
Ashea.
I mean, it could be. I have it. Asahel. I don't know, but it was weird. He was fleet of foot or something, and he was chasing him around. And
Yeah,
at first, I'm thinking Abner's running in fear, but he is because he doesn't want to kill this dude, but he
he
won't
doesn't
stop.
want to.
Yeah, so thought that was
Yeah,
weird.
he said something about like, I don't want to have to kill you and then face your brother. I'll never be able to face your brother again.
Yeah,
He told him to turn left or right. Quit pursuing me. What are you doing? Turn left or right. But he kept running straight for him. So finally, I don't know how long this went on, but finally Abner had had enough. And he turned and speared the fellow. And that guy fell and died. So after, the brother died, Joab's brother, and then they have another brother, Abishai, they pursued Abner. And Abner cried out in verse 26, how long before you order your men to stop pursuing the fellow Israelites?
the
So
word.
Joab blew a trumpet and the fighting stopped.
Yeah, and remember, Abishai was the one that went down when Abner was sleeping outside of Saul's tent. So he was,
Thank
he was
you.
one
I
of
was trying to remember how I knew him. Okay.
Hmm?
Okay, that makes sense. So these are three brothers. And the one of them fell because he was pursuing Abner. And I think Abner sort of felt like I could easily take this guy, but I don't want to. And he finally had no choice.
Yeah, I think Joab and Abishai were the warriors, and the other one was just
Right.
he was younger, not experienced, and Abner was the commander. So
After the battle, Abner took his army to Mahanaim, and then Joab took his men and marched them back to Hebron. So they went their separate ways. Chapter 3, war between the house of Saul and the house of David lasted a very long time. David grew stronger and the house of Saul weaker. And I think we know why, because the Lord was with David. In this time, David had taken 6 more wives to add to his collection, and he had 6 more sons, one with each of them. And it went on to name the boys and the wives' names.
so were they? So I was interesting. I couldn't tell if it was 6 more wives or if he had 6 more sons. So because I know, yeah, because one was with I didn't realize, did he have a with Abigail? This maybe his first son with Abigail. I thought maybe he had one before.
Mhm.
Who knows? But yeah, we'll learn in 2 Samuel that he proliferates. He spreads his seed far and wide.
Yes,
Some
absolutely.
good comes of it. So which is a good pattern, because as we learned, a lot of the sons are not very respectable. So
It seems to be the case. Yeah. It seems to be a long history of that with these well-known people that are blessed by the Lord. They have these kids that are rebels.
whether the priests or the judges, it's, and then they had kids that are bad, just like everybody else.
Yep. Like my pooch. Abner goes over to David. We got something interesting going on here.
Oh yeah, writing was on the wall.
King Ishbosheth offended Abner by accusing him of sleeping with one of his father's concubines. Abner sent a message to David in verse 12. Whose land is it? Make an agreement with me, and I will help bring all of Israel over to you. So I guess that was just it. Abner had finally had it with this guy and said, who do you think you are to come to me and accuse me after everything that I've done?
Yeah, that was where I was going to say is he had gained rank, right? I think Saul's son Ishbosheth was, and again, I don't think he's his last one. I think that's just the one that was picked, because I think there's still a lame one that we'll read about. But yeah, but he all of a sudden now Abner's like, we know what the right thing is, and he insulted him. He's like, I'm done with this. The son was afraid, so now he knew it was time, right? So he knew that set up the ability for him not to get pushback, because obviously if the king said, hey, this guy's going against your king, in my opinion,
Right.
but he's like, I'm afraid of him, so he's got the power now to go do it.
He's got the power, and what a power to have. He's going to be able to, really find some favor in David's eyes here.
It doesn't, the
Um,
point is it doesn't end well, but yeah, but not because of David, so.
right. So, this message got to David, or he took the message to David, and, David agreed on the condition that his wife, Michal, was returned. So she hasn't been with him for a while.
Yeah, she was with, remember Saul gave her away to, was it Paltiel or whatever his name was? Paltiel?
Yeah. So this is kind of sad. I don't
Yeah.
know much about that guy, but while they were bringing his wife back, her husband, or the man that she was with now, her husband, followed the whole way, sort of weeping and crying. He just didn't want to see her go. I
Yeah,
thought,
I
oh,
would make it the hell back. Go home though. We don't want you here. It would be odd. So,
right. He had to finally turn and go back home without his wife.
yeah.
So that night or that day, Abner feasted with David, and he said in verse 21, "Let me go at once and assemble all Israel for my Lord King." And he went in peace, and that's important. David
Yeah.
will, say that again, that he went in peace. So
Yes, he
they
did.
are not at war with Abner. All's good. Then we get into Joab. He comes back and decides to murder Abner. Why would he want to murder Abner? It seems like such a nice guy.
Well, remember Abner killed his brother. So
That's right. So we're talking about revenge, and revenge really isn't a good thing in the Lord's eyes. Joab returns from a raid, and he questions David. He had heard that, what had happened. He said in verse 24, "Why did you let him go? He came to deceive you and spy on you. Like, it's obvious what he was doing. He's not here to help you. He's deceiving you, basically." And Joab sent a message for some men to retrieve Abner and had him return. And it was under the guise of he needed to speak to him personally about some situation. He took him aside in some room and finished him off.
Yep, not a good thing. Not for Joab. So
Exactly, because we know what happens. Obviously, David gets word of this, and he's upset with Joab. And I don't know if I want to use the word curse, because they didn't use that in the Bible that I remember, but he wished ill will on him and his family for basically eternity.
yeah, I wrote down the same word. It kind of gets to the point. Yeah, he wished harm on his family and his descendants for doing what he did. And that it was pretty bold and bold. I mean, that was pretty bold, I think, for Joab to do that. Now I guess he has
Yeah.
There's some reasons that I'm starting to learn, and especially after, I'm not going to segue, we can talk at the end of it, but I liked your video you posted today about the Canadian dude. We'll talk about why did God punish Cain? Revenge is evil and it doesn't stop. It cycles. Right. I think this is kind of,
that's right.
See, revenge just got Joab and his family in trouble. So
yeah, exactly. He's allowed to get away with this. When does it stop? When does it end? It doesn't. And there was a reason why the Great Flood happened. Things got out of control. Now he knows he's got to nip things in the bud.
Yep.
Immediately. So Abner was buried, and Hebron and David wept, and he sang a lament. David sang a lament for Abner, which, if you're reading along with us, which you should be, you will be able to read that lament for yourself.
Yeah, and David's quite the poet, musician, and a lyricist, because I believe he wrote a lot of the songs. So, so he's
very good. Right. Chapter 3 continues. After that, David fasted, and all the people of Israel knew that David had not taken a part in Abner's murder. That was very important to David. He wanted everybody to know that his hands were clean. His hands did not have blood on them. In verse 39, David said, "May the Lord repay the evildoer according to his evil deeds." And I remember him saying at one point, "May all your family, be without boils and have this and have that and die young." And so,
yeah, he cursed him. Well, basically wished bad stuff on him. Yes.
Right.
So
a lot of murder going on here. Somebody else comes up and gets killed in chapter 4.
Yeah, if we didn't learn something from the guy that brought the killed Saul, go on. This is
exactly. Well, I'm into chapter 4. Is that where you're at?
Exactly. Yep. Ishbosheth murdered.
Murdered. And remember, he's the king of Israel, Saul's son. Abner got him into that position. And he had two brothers. So Saul had many sons, Dana and Rechab. And they led raiding parties for Ishbosheth. While Ishbosheth was taking his noonday rest, I do that every day too. So I got a lot in common with this guy. The brothers came to his house, and while he was laying in bed, stabbed him in the stomach.
So I want to correct you though.
Right.
I think they're not brothers. They're the two leaders. Saul's son had two leaders. So these are Ishbosheth, some of the old men.
Okay.
And what happened, I think, is when they saw Abner was killed, they want to gain favor in David's eyes. So they thought that Abner was killed by David's decree. So I
they
think
saw the writing on the wall. Ishbosheth is.
they thought they saw writing on the wall.
Yes, exactly. He's going to be out of the picture. We want to be, in up here in rank with David. This is a good way we can do it. Well, we'll find out. Maybe not. Oh, and then after they killed him, they cut off his head.
And they took that head where?
To David.
Yep.
And they basically took it in and said, hey, look what we did for you. Now, give us a higher rank in your army or throw some jewels at us or something. And well, David was not pleased. Basically said, you killed an innocent man in his own house while he's lying in his own bed. So
which is heinous, extremely heinous. Not only that, but he was a king. I mean, that's an ultimate treason right there. And and David still mourning after having Abner killed. So yeah, it was, that was just a poor move.
Exactly. And David seemed to have compassion for his enemy, right? Which is what the Lord tells us.
Saul, the anointed kingdom, he's still in. He knows that, so the whole reason why we kind of alluded to it, but Abner knew that he needed to fulfill. He knew what God's wish was, is David would be king over all Israel. And the writing was on the wall as the more the battles went on, the stronger David got. So he's like, yeah, it's true. David's in favor. He's the anointed one now. He was going to fulfill that. It ultimately happens, as we'll learn, but he loses his life, and so does Ishbosheth, David's, Saul's son.
We're seeing a lot of examples here of people doing really the opposite of what they should do according to God's law. They're doing it for selfish reasons.
Yeah.
They're doing it for gain. They're doing it for revenge. And obviously, those are not the right reasons to do this. Turn the other cheek, forgive thy enemy, love thy enemy. But, it is what it is, right? We've seen this all before. Chapter 5, David becomes king over Israel. I know that they mentioned in there that he was king of Judah for 7 years.
7.5 years, 7 years, 6 months.
And Ishbosheth was king over Israel for 2 years. So now he is king over all of Israel. King David made a covenant with the elders of Israel, and they anointed him king. At this point, he's 30 years old, and his reign lasted, they said, for 40 years.
His total kinghood was 40 years, 33 of them over Israel. So technically, it would be 40 years and 40 and a half years, because 7.5 plus 33.
I didn't realize that. So his problems aren't over yet, though, right? We've got an occupier in Jerusalem, and at this point, is Jerusalem considered their holy city, their capital, their?
Well, it's one of their one of the chosen land, promised land cities. So it's obviously because Israel didn't take heed to God, he led turmoil amongst them, right? So all the land they had to fight for it constantly. People were invading it, and this time, yes. So the Jebusites, who they've been fighting since the beginning too, not probably as much as the Philistines, but the Jebusites were that was mentioned over and over again when I will rid you of the Moabites, the Jebusites, and so that's who
they were a big thorn in their side this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And so they controlled Jerusalem, like you mentioned. David and his army fought and captured the fortress of Zion.
Zion.
Now,
the city of David, as it's known.
Yeah,
now
I should have looked this up. I mean, they're talking about Jerusalem, but now we're talking about the fortress of Zion.
within Jerusalem.
That's within Jerusalem. Okay. And he renamed it the city of David in verse 9, chapter 5. Are we saying that this Jerusalem is now being called the city of David?
We
Or is that-
are, I believe so. Yeah, because that's so even today, Jerusalem is, is important. I believe. I mean, so don't quote me, but Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, isn't it?
Okay. Well, I want to know. So if anybody out there knows this, please comment. We want to be educated. Chapter 5 continues. David defeats, here we go, the Philistines. These guys,
Yeah.
they don't give up. They must like multiply like crazy after each battle, raise a bunch of soldiers, go into battle. And the Philistines heard that David was anointed king, and their army went to the valley of Rephaim, I'm going to say.
Yep.
That sound good?
Yep.
David inquired of the Lord in verse 19. Again, asking the Lord, having faith, will you deliver them into my hands? And the Lord responds, basically, yes. The Philistines were conquered. David in verse 20 says, as water breaks out, the Lord is broken out against my enemies. And the place was called Baal Perazim. Lord,
I think Baal. Baal must, yeah, that's weird. I think Baal is probably another name for God, a god.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
yes, we've heard of Baal. Correct.
Yeah,
Lord,
the bad.
So the battle's not over. Philistines regroup and they come back. They seem to have endless amounts of soldiers. This time, the Lord tells David in verse 23, do not go straight up, but circle from behind. The Lord will go out in front of you and strike the Philistine army. David struck down the Philistines all the way from Gibeon to Gazer, with the Lord leading the way. Awesome.
Yeah, it was interesting because he's like, it's when you circle around, once you hear the marching in the tops of the trees, the poplar trees, move quickly. That so yeah,
that was their signal the Lord gave.
Oh yeah, yep. And
awesome. We're on to chapter 6. The ark brought to Jerusalem.
This is a David
wanted the ark in Jerusalem. David brought 30,000 men to Baalah in Judah to move the ark of the God on a brand new cart.
They're able-bodied men, so that must be the young ones, the workhorses.
Right. Now I want to know about these men. These are obviously men that are able to get near the ark. So they're descendants of.
Some are, yeah, because because in Judah, Abinadab's house is the priest's house that was where the ark was, and his two sons, Uzzah and Ahio. I think
that's so terrible for this guy.
Uzzah?
Yeah. So as they're traveling along, an oxen stumbles, and I think Uzzah, thinking that the ark is going to go and possibly crashing to the ground, reaches out his hand to sort of steady it. I'm thinking, right? Or just maybe it's just a reaction. You just do it.
Yep. Reaction.
And Lord struck him down.
He's gone.
Just like that. So even though he may have inadvertently, like I said, like a knee-jerk reaction or a reflex, he just grabbed the hold. He wasn't supposed to, but he didn't think about it, and boom, he's gone.
Yeah, I think was what God was. So a couple of things. God was angered. That's why he struck him down. But I think God, I think they were maybe being careless. Maybe they aren't watching and be careful. So the ark wouldn't have stumbled. I think that's the point. But the bigger point is David was mad at the Lord. And so he named the place Perez Uzzah, outbreak against Uzzah.
Yeah.
So
I was glad to read that because I felt the same way. I sort of felt like that's not fair. You know what I mean? But
I agree.
God had his reasons, and David felt the same way. So yeah, David was angry
and afraid. He's like, because he was bringing the ark back to his house.
Yeah, and it made him afraid of it.
Yeah.
So he thought, maybe I shouldn't bring this thing back. How am I going to be near this thing if anybody whatever touches it? You just zap them. So they decided to do a little detour, and it was left at the home of Obed Edom. And once the ark was there, the Lord blessed his family
Oh yeah.
and everything that he had. Big time.
Yep.
Well,
So
David hears about this. I think 2 months goes by, and here's Abed Adam. I don't know what his life was like before the ark got there, but whew, his
yeah.
life is like amazing now. And so David hears about this. Oh, well, maybe maybe I need to reconsider this and bring the ark back to my house. So David went to get the ark and bring it back to the city of David. David wore a linen ephod and he danced before the Lord with all his might. I have a picture in my head, and it's probably nothing like that, but I just picture this guy just going nuts and crazy, arms just flailing, and that's what it sort of sounds like.
Which is
You know,
bizarre.
all kinds of music and shouts, and everybody's just happy that the ark is on its way.
What do they do first though? After 6 steps of moving the ark, what do they do? He
I can't
offers,
remember.
yeah, he offered sacrifice. He did a young bull and a fattened calf. So he was kind of appeasing God. He's like, we're gonna move you. But here's, so he basically offered sacrifices. And another thing too was his wife Michal, she was angry at this. She was making a fool out of himself, and apparently he's half naked in his ephod. So and dancing in front of the slave girls and stuff. She's pretty
Right.
pissed at that, which is
Right.
probably a good thing, as we learned.
In verse 20, it says, dancing half naked in view of the slave girls, and as any vulgar fellow would. And David replies to her in verse 21, it was before the Lord who chose me over your father. Ooh, that's cold.
Oh yeah.
Become more undignified than this. By the slave girls you spoke of, I will be held in honor. And they went on to say that Michal had no children to the day of her death. They
Nope.
didn't say that was any sort of a punishment. They just went ahead, they just put that in there.
Yeah, I'm thinking that David he chose to not plant the seed there. He had enough wives
Okay, that's true. Yeah. So there was really no relationship possibly after that. Chapter 7, God's promise to David. David settles in his palace. So we're in the city of David, and David has a palace there.
Yeah,
which,
a lot of the surrounding people were bringing him like a lot of cedar and a lot of things to build up his house.
I'm thinking palaces are built of stone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think this was the palace. Remember, they couldn't get into it. They made some you had to go through some tunnel to get in, and he did it. And it was a fortress, right? So now they're making it more of a palace. So it went from just like a cold, dark, and dim to now they're going to make it, a palace fortress. Like it's what I'm envisioning.
The Lord ended up speaking with Nathan the prophet, who was with David. And he said in verse 1, David says, here I am living in a house of cedar while the ark of the God remains in a tent. So he just had a tent set up, which is basically what the ark has always been in anyways.
Well, I was going to say, this was a very, David told Nathan this before the Lord spoke to him. David said, here I am living in this greatness, and the Lord's in the tent. And oh my goodness, God basically goes on, you're the first person who's actually, we've been roaming with you and living in tents forever, and we settled here and settled there. You're the first person who's gonna build me something. And boy, God's tickled pink with that one. At least that's what I took. Did you get that? Because that's when he told Nathan what you just mentioned.
Yeah. Let's continue just a little bit and see what plays out here, because I actually didn't take it that way.
Okay.
I sort of took it like the Lord was saying to him, I've always lived in tents. I don't need anything special, and you're not going to be the one to build it for me anyways, is what he told him.
Okay.
And he goes on to tell him, I don't know, Steve, please, if anybody out there, and I'll have to go back and reread it because you could possibly be right. Absolutely.
Well, I'm gonna rebut that to the point on your agreement too, because we learned that Jesus, who's a descendant of David's line, who's the one that builds the house for him. So
he says in verses 5 through 7, are you the one to build a house to dwell in? I've been moved from tent to tent and never asked once why you have not built me a house of cedar. And then
Okay.
8 through 16, through Nathan the Lord, who, he's going to tell Nathan, I want you to give this message to David. This is what I've done for you, and this is what I will do for you. I took you from the pasture and appointed you ruler. I've been with you. I've cut off your enemies. I've provided a place for my people, given homes, given them rest from their enemies. Lord will establish a house for you. Your offspring will succeed you, and he will build a house for me in my name. Your house, kingdom, throne will endure forever.
So all the varies I said, I take them. And that's the point of this. This is the whole point of these videos is I will stand corrected. I actually like now that you read that because I'd paraphrase that whole thing.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So I do. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So God is just telling him also not only about what he's done now, but also what is going to happen in the future for his family. And this just like David is just unbelievably humbled and thankful at this point, And again, David says prayer, who am I that you would do this? Right? I was a shepherd for gosh sakes, and to do this for my family, praises the Lord for all he has done for Israel. Not just for himself, but what he's also done for Israel. I think that's important. And then he finally offered a prayer for the Lord. And again, it's a big, long thing that you can read.
How great God is and how, in it. So how he chose him. So
I do want to reread that because I am curious. And actually, maybe I'll do a little Google too and just see what they say out there in the old internet about that. How God exactly was sort of phrasing that and what tone he was phrasing that in. Like, I don't need it, or, well, you know what? I've always lived in tents, but your family, your one of your sons will build me a final home.
Yep. And I think again, the lineage of Jesus is through David, always, but he was this. So yeah, I'm going to reread it again too. Cause again, I first read it. I'm like, wow, he's really excited. But after reading the quotes that you had from the Bible, okay, I get to your point. So yeah, we'll reread it. And I didn't read this time the Bible for Dummies. Just went over my head and didn't think about it. So
sure.
I wonder if they would have said something. So I'll check that too. And
well, the way that David felt makes perfect sense. Who am I to live in this palace? Well, the Lord should have something greater than me. But you have to look at it from the Lord's point of view. He doesn't care about a house. He doesn't.
Good point.
Care what his house is. He wants his people to be faithful, to believe in him, follow the commandments. That's what's most important. Chapter 8, he goes on to list, there's a whole list of David's victories, basically. And, all the people that he's conquered. I don't know if you want to start, if you want to list some of these, Steve, or.
Well, I was gonna say one of the things I thought was the Moabites. He basically made them lay down and measure them off with a length of a cord. Every 2 lengths he put to death. The third was allowed to live. Could you imagine?
They cut off. Oh my God!
Duck, duck, goose. Oh,
yeah.
duck, goose.
Exactly what I thought.
Or I guess duck,
number three.
So,
oh my God! He subdued the Philistines. And he took an important city, Matheg Amana, I guess. Ziba, the king of Hadadezer, he conquered him.
Hadadezer.
I can't pronounce this stuff.
Yeah.
The Armenians came to King Zaba's aid. Well, that was a mistake. Killed 22,000 of them. King Tao of Hamath was at war with the desert. And he sent tributes and congrats of silver, gold, and bronze to David. And David, of course, took those offerings and dedicated them to the Lord, which he's always done with everything he's ever taken or gotten, as far as silver and gold and all that. And he struck down 18,000 Edomites. Then at the very end of the chapter, he goes on to assign leaderships for the army, a secretary, a treasurer, and a lot of other important positions to sort of establish his hierarchy there.
And the repeated theme is God gave David victory wherever he went. So, and everywhere he conquered, he put out, what are those, like military bases or whatever? garrisons. Yeah,
Yes.
garrisons, and then they were becoming his subjects. So he's spreading his kingdom, which is, you know, what he was
Right.
meant to be. So yeah, there's a lot of like, as we're watching The Chosen, as we can see how the disciples are confused, right? Because they're expecting Jesus to be this warrior like King David was, and
Right.
totally different.
Makes sense. I mean, I can understand from their point of view, they're being oppressed.
All
And
the
they're
stories
thinking,
are about great warriors leading them out of trouble, conquering their enemies. Jesus comes down, and it's like, wait a minute here, I'm doing this greater
peace
thing.
and love.
Yep.
Peace and love. So
Love, yeah.
we're gonna wrap this up. That's chapters 1 through 8. We hope you enjoyed it. Next episode, we're gonna do chapters 9 through something. I don't think we're 100% sure yet, but we will let you know this coming up week. Got anything else to say there, Steve, before we sign out?
Okay, some exciting stuff. I mean, everybody's ever heard of King David. He does
Yeah.
some nasty stuff. So he doesn't fall out of favor with God, but he takes on he falls in love with one of his general's wives, and so we'll learn about that next. That's exciting, pretty famous story. Not quite as much as David and Goliath, but it's probably second in my opinion of most notable acts. But yeah, other than that, I think this is good. It was a quick read. I'm glad we find ourselves with long videos, which is, that's good because the conversation
Yeah.
gets sunk, we learn it more. Like today, it was one of the things where you interpreted one way and I interpreted another way. And
It's
so, yeah,
interesting.
that's what it's all about. I'm
Yeah.
enjoying it.
That's what makes this good. So, I'm not just interpreting something myself and then moving on to the next. We're having a discussion so that we can learn and try to understand different perspectives and, hopefully try to get this right. But it's all
Yes.
good.
Yeah, I still
So-
want to, I mean, I'm trying to think because, this is our journey from cover to cover.
Right.
We'll have to talk about, I feel this desire to almost do a recap on kind of some of the stuff we did because we're, but maybe we'll wait and do recaps after we're through, but we're a long ways from being through. So
Right.
from that, I guess we'll bit of do. Oh, you still have
The whole world hears.